that all commissioners are present. First item up is the order of business. Mr. Winningham, are there any changes to the order of business?
Mr. President, Commissioners, on your packet, there was a few items that were listed with other city staff. Those that aren't here today, be our Deputy City Administrator Carlson. I will be covering that agenda item. It's 3C and D2. I'll be covering the HR monthly report as well. And down in the Public Works, number 6, I'll be covering the item for Mr. Zuroff for the water main replacement task order. No other changes on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Winningham. Any questions on the amended order of business? There are no questions. Look for a motion on the order of business.
Move to approve.
Second.
Move to approve by Commissioner Oderman, second by Commissioner Frederick. Any further discussion on the order of business? Hearing none, all in favor of the order of business as amended, state aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item up is the consent agenda. Commissioners, are there any items on the consent agenda you wish to discuss? No discussion. I'd look for a motion on the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Sobeluk,
Second.
second by Commissioner Walla. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Sobeluk,
Aye.
Ms. Walla,
Aye.
Mr. Frederick,
Aye.
Mr. Oderman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll move right into administration and finance. First item up is our monthly financial report, and this will be handled by City Accountant Maury. Welcome.
Thank you, President Decker and Commissioners. So this financial report will look a little different than it has throughout the year. We'll do our year-end financial report at the first meeting in March. We have to close out our books by March 1st, so that's when we'll get you the budget versus actual and our typical financial report that you see. But for the purpose of this meeting, we thought it'd be a good time to give you a revenue update to see where we ended compared to prior years, just to give the Commission and the public an idea of where our revenue collections finished in 2021. So we'll start off with a slide that looks familiar. This is our 1% sales tax breakdown. We have the 2019 is in blue, 2020 is in light red, and then the darker red is 2021. So you can see at the very end of that line chart there, the darker line 2021, we're actually higher than we were in both 2020 and 2019. It was a really good month for us. We're actually 196,000 higher in December of 21 compared to December of 2019. So about a 33% increase there. And then after this 0.5% sales tax slide, which is exactly half of the previous slide, this slide here shows our totals for our entire 1.5% sales tax. So both the 1% collection and the 0.5% collection are combined into this slide. On the very left, you see 2016. That's our first number we started with, about $7.5 million. The furthest bar on the graph on the right is 2021. So we're about just a little over 8.9 million you can see in 2021. The darker green bar, this 2019. So we are down about 478,000 compared to 2019. So about just a little over 5% decrease there. But you can see we're very close, almost identical to where we were in 2020, only down about $431, so less than 1% difference in our 1.5% sales tax from 2020 to 2021. And then on our hospitality tax, so again, the blue line being 2019 and the darker darker red line being 2021. So we are a little bit higher here as well, about $19,000 higher in December 21 compared to December of 19. So about a 27% increase there. And then with our yearly totals, so you can see not quite as high as where we were in 2018 or 2019 in those middle two bars on the bar chart. In our 2021 collections altogether, we're down about 82,000 compared to the entire year of 2019. So that's about an 8.2% decrease. And then you can see the lighter blue line towards the right there is 2020, up about $11,000 there, just over a 1% increase in our hospitality tax from 2020 into 2021. This line graph here for our occupancy tax. So we are up just a little bit in December of 21 compared to December of 19, just about a $2,800 difference. So not a huge change there. It is about 11% increase. And then for our yearly totals, again, not quite where we were in 2019, but we are doing significantly better than we were in 2020. We are down 67,000 compared to 2019, but we're up 58,000, roughly 58,000 compared to 2020. So about a 22% increase there over the prior year. And then this last line graph here is for our oil impact revenue. So we're up about 122,000 in our oil impact collections compared to December of 2019. So about a 10% increase there. And then comparing our yearly totals, so you can see the trend where we're back up to where we were close in that 2018, 2019 range in the light green and the dark green. So compared to 2019, we're down 317,000. That's about a 2.3% decrease. And then comparing 2021 to 2020, we're actually up about 2.2 million, so about a 20% increase over the prior year. So with that, like I mentioned before, we'll have a more comprehensive year-end financial report at the beginning of March. And city staff recommends approval, and I'll do my best to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Maury. Any questions for Mr. Maury on the financial report?
Mr. President.
Mr. Oderman?
You know, just looking at the sales tax comparison from year to year, I think it's important to note with how abnormal the last 2 years were, 20 and 21, how well we weathered the storm. And I think it's because, you know, as a city, we decided to stay open. We didn't have mandates and things like that. And I think that's commendable to know that, you know, hindsight being 2020, that we made the right decisions. And I just thought that was something that was important to kind of highlight, because being at 8.9 million in sales tax revenue when, you know, other municipalities really felt a crunch as a result of COVID in their sales tax revenues, to be able to just be a little bit behind where we were when things were normal is pretty great, I think. And it's really exciting to see, you know, some of these numbers bounce back, and in that oil impact comparison, I mean, we're right in line with where we were in 2019 almost. So
I agree. It'll be an interesting year, 2022. So we'll see.
and you know, the thing is, we were purposely conservative when we budgeted that oil impact, and so we've got a good cushion built into the budget there. And yeah.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Maury?
I'd move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Sobeluk.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Oderman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Wallach?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item up is a beer and wine on sale liquor license. This is for Eyewear Concepts, presented by City Administrator Winningham.
Mr. President and Commissioners, this is a reapplication based on our updated ordinance. for 2022. This is for beer and wine only on sale. Previously, the business had the beer only on sale license. We see no issue from city staff and recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Winningham. Any questions for Mr. Winningham or staff on this liquor license renewal? Not, I'd look for a motion.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Frederick,
Second.
second by Commissioner Walla. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Sola?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Our next item up is the actuarial service consulting agreement for 2022. City Administrator Winningham, you'll be handling this.
Mr. President, Commissioners, this consulting agreement, as we've previously had before, is for actuarial services. This will go through January of 2022 for 1 year to cover our pension plan funding valuations and other pension plan valuations in order for our numbers to be correct. We have had good service with them previously, and financial staff and myself recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Winningham. Any questions on this service consulting agreement? Any no questions or comments, I'd look for a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion to approve by Commissioner Solak,
Second.
second by Commissioner Frederick. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Soboluk,
Aye.
Mr. Frederick,
Aye.
Ms. Walla,
Aye.
Mr. Oderman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. You see, we have a report from the Dickinson Youth Commission, and that is to be presented by President Meyer, but I do not see her in the crowd.
She couldn't make it tonight, so I believe.
So, do we got somebody pinch hitting for her? We do. All right.
First of all, I want to say thank you for your guys' support as a commission. The Dickinson Youth Commission really appreciates everything that you guys have been contributing, from starting us up to continuing to support us and allowing us to speak and update you guys on what we're currently working on and what we have been working on. First thing is, I was supposed to have another person here to speak on behalf of the Snow Days event, which we put on this last month.
Before you continue, just for all our loyal fans out there, can you introduce yourself to them?
Oh, sorry. My name is Dante Domini. I am serving as the Vice President of the Dickinson Youth Commission.
Thank you.
But from what I heard of Snow Days, we had more support than we had ever expected to show up from the youth of Dickinson. About 10 times the amount of students that we planned on showing up showed up. There was a variety of games and activities that went on and door prizes that were given away, and there seemed to be a want for more activities like such at Snow Days. Proved that there's a desire within the youth of Dickinson for activities, youth-based, and since Truman is here, he might be able to speak a little bit better about Snow Days.
You'll pardon my tardiness, commissioners, but the Snow Days was an absolutely fantastic event. We had a great turnout. We had a turnout of about 180 people once you figure out the people who came but didn't put their name on the list and all the other people who we had who entered in the door prizes and the other just countings that we had going on throughout the night. We were able to have a broomball tournament, which had 5 teams compete, and we were able to leave that with minimal injuries from the team members. I myself was out of commission for a day with a broom to the back, but it was a very fun event all around, and I think a lot of people enjoyed it and will be keen to come around next year. We are now actually working towards planning our next few events, so we're in talks with the college, we're in talks with the Roosevelt Grand Dakota and the Astoria Hotel for possible venues for future events, as well as planning those future events that we are working on.
One of those events that we're currently working on is our Valentine's dance, which is scheduled for February 11th. We're hoping that we're going to have a DJ, some refreshments, and kind of make it a fun-filled night for the youth of Dickinson as well, to kind of hit off another event for the youth. We plan on helping out with the State of the City and the Fall Gala.
For the Downtown Dickinson Association.
Further, we are also looking to kind of meet the need of volunteer hours for high school graduates of Dickinson High, and matching that need with the need for help among organizations in Dickinson for volunteers. We're trying to pair up those to try and better the community of Dickinson. Currently speaking with the superintendent, Dr. Luton, about trying to get something like that started. We're also speaking with a variety of organizations that could possibly use some donations, whether it be by time or money. The Dickinson Youth Commission is really looking for projects that we can get up and going and help out some organizations to improve the community as well.
So as previously mentioned when I was here last time, we are developing a program where kids who need volunteer service hours, the Youth Commission will pair them with local community services and different charities in the city of Dickinson that need community service hours. So we're acting as a programming arm to be able to take these kids who have this resource to offer community service time and giving it to those charities that are in need of it throughout the city.
And that would be about as far as we've gotten so far. So thank you guys. We appreciate all your help and support.
I think you've accomplished quite a bit, so in a short period of time. So we really do appreciate all your hard work. So, commissioners, any other comments?
Same. It's good to see you guys getting out there and getting after it. We appreciate it. I think it's going to be a good program for a lot of years to come, and you guys will always be the ones that got it started. So,
Thank you.
congratulations.
Yeah, I went over to the ice arena that night that you guys had the Snow Days event, and I was pretty blown away. I got over there about 9:45, 10 o'clock, and the amount of kids that you guys had there at that time, I was blown away. And at the Youth Commission meeting last week, they talked about how they were expecting to see 20, 25 kids, and there was 180, and I think they were all there when I was there. Because I mean, it was nice, organized chaos. You guys did a really great job of putting that together and kind of keeping it under wraps. So.
Mr. President, just not to miss, but can you mention just a couple of the companies that donated, and then mention a little bit about Rotary and the funding they provided?
Yes, so Rotary, as one of the partners of the Youth Commission, did donate $500 for us to be able to give away prizes and be able to have that ability to. I know Rotary, I'm not quite sure how many of the other businesses, would be an excellent question for our treasurer, but I know that several local Dickinson businesses did donate gift cards and money to buy gift cards for us to be able to hold an event that has more intrigue to our audience.
We'll get a snapshot of that posted on the Dickinson Youth Instagram at some point, and that way people can follow that. Thank you so much for giving that report.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, commissioners.
Our next report is our monthly HR report, and City Administrator Winningham will be handling this.
Mr. President and Commissioners, if you look on your packet and you open up the hiring journal, I'll just speak to some of the highlights. If you'll look at some of the recent hiring, we spoke about this at the last commission meeting, but we did hire one for animal control. If you'll go down to look at what I think is one of our major needs, is our street maintenance operator. It shows that there's 2 openings. If you count all those, it's really 4 total openings with our seasonal openings also. We've had limited applications, and we've had no offers. That position is reopened. You'll see it flying on the city website and through HR. There's a few others that I know that the police can talk about, but we're still sticking with our very high standards for our police officers. We do have a number of applicants, and there are a few that we do deem qualified, and they'll be going through the process. And really, subject to any questions, and I'll just hold. If there's any questions, then I can answer them.
These seasonal maintenance operators, I know one of the requirements, and I could be incorrect, but I think it is that they have a CDL. Is that a requirement for the application, or will we train once they're hired?
So we can talk a little bit about the risk to the city, but if you are driving a 26,000 plus vehicle, then yes, CDL. So if that has a blade, if it's a loader or another piece of equipment, there is no requirement for CDL. Essentially, we could, in emergency situations, we can, and we've asked the team to consider looking at how we would do that training program to have some of those that are qualified operators without a CDL that may be able to run a plow. It is a risk. It's not an easy piece of equipment to handle with vehicles and personnel around, but it is something we are considering. I have asked the question because nationally, I think it's going to be a struggle. Federal motor carrier laws have changed, so they will require us to do more training with CDL. That's nationwide. We will be no different in having the struggles of finding CDL operators at the $19 to $20 pay that we start at. And so city staff is considering how we would present that back to the commission once we see essentially an emergency need. Ideally, we'd like to find that need in-house. We'd like to be able to find competent city workers that are willing to do that extra for the city, since they're already covered by the city. I think in the past that's happened. I think there's been some creativity during snow emergencies, but I'd like to have that as a standard instead of doing it in a crisis. So staff is looking at that, but I think it's a great question. So the answer is no, you don't need a CDL for certain piece of equipment, but if it is a commercial vehicle, or if it's a vehicle over 26,000 pounds that's roadworthy, then it has to have a CDL.
I was just thinking with the seasonal snowplow operators, we have individuals within the community that would like to apply. They do not have CDL. We look on a case-by-case basis and sign them up so that we do have that emergency staff available, especially if they are under the understanding that they're on call. But I do think there are some retired operators within the city that would step up and possibly fill that role for us.
Like a PRN basis, yeah.
And I said a lot there. I probably might have made any mistakes, but Mr. Dave Clay, if you think that was a sufficient answer, if you're still sitting here.
Yeah, on the seasonal snowplow.
Come to the microphone, though, please.
On the seasonal snowplow, it's kind of tough to get somebody without a CDL because you need them right in that case of emergency. So typically, in the past, going back to a lot of data and emails with prior people that have been here, it's kind of tough to bring them in without a CDL because you call them when you need them. We do currently hire people without a CDL, but as you'll see in the presentation I'll be giving to you guys, as of February 7th, we have to start training our employees under the Federal Motor Carriers Act, and so it's kind of tough. We currently do. If we don't move through this training, we won't be able to hire you unless you have a CDL. So seasonal, you definitely got to have a CDL to get behind the plow, but any other piece of equipment, you do not have to.
Some of the questions, Mr. President and Commissioners, will be answered if you look down one of our driver training programs. That there is some creative considerations. I think we start with the standard baseline, but then we have to work to have all those emergencies laid out. Because in the event of a snowmageddon, once again, we would want all hands, and we'd want those that we've deemed operator level that may not have a CDL. I think within the city limits of Dickinson, I think we would we would make those considerations. Particularly if everybody was snowed in and we only have operators out there on the street, I think it would be worth the risk. But I think that's a case by case, and we don't want to do that during the crisis. So that'll be something we are considering.
And
Correct.
we still have the pool for the contracted.
Yes. Yes,
Labor
we
for
currently
snow
have
removal.
2 contractors that are on board. And in the past is what's happened with snow emergency at that point, and it's all hands on deck. We get everybody from solid waste, water department, everybody that's went through the training and that has had that type of service. They help out quite a bit.
Okay. Anything else to highlight in the HR report, Mr. Winningham?
Mr. President, not at this time.
Okay.
I think as we go, what I'm asking HR to do is be able to talk a bit during our spring retreat. There'll be some considerations. We do need to consider some creative solutions to some of our high demand, low density skill sets that is difficult, as we just talked about CDLs. But there's a few other within the city that we're going to have to really look at what we may be able to do as a city to hire some of those skill sets.
Okay.
But I'm not ready to really talk about it publicly tonight.
All right, thank you. We'll move along to our City Hall update. Mr. Winningham?
Mr. President, Commissioners, I wanted to just give a brief overview to hit some of the highlights for what we think is on track. We have published the timeline for the City Hall move. If you walked around the old City Hall, the 2 terms are, this is now the old City Hall, the new City Hall. The older building, which is now the new City Hall, which is downtown, is how we've labeled them. So in the old City Hall, where we're currently sitting, we have, not scientifically, about 85% of the staff moved over. We're essentially competing with each punch list that Roars Construction has been able to accomplish. Although I believe they are behind in some of those items that they should have been complete on, there is reasons, I can call them excuses, but essentially reasons why all of the work is not completely done. As you know, during the contract, there was a specific timeline. What we're going to do is continue to push to get the items done. We want to be open for business on the 24th of January. That's what we've put out to the public. And I know that the crew from Roars is working really hard to get that all done this week. So I wanted to just provide just a little bit of that insight. Some of the items that we were waiting for, some of the hardware, that still was a consideration, so we can talk about supply chains and the problems that we're faced with. But what we're really seeing is that it's manpower intensive now. We'd like to see more hands and feet over there getting the final touches done before city staff completely moves in. That's what I saw a little bit over the weekend. I see that now this week. We're hoping that intensity continues to go up into Friday, and so that we can consider that completely done. And a final walkthrough and acceptance will probably be after we are fully occupied. So the 24th, we still are going to be considered open for business over in the new City Hall, and we will have our first court on the 27th of January in the new City Hall, and we'll have our first commission meeting in the new commission room on the 1st of February. If any of that changes on an emergency basis, then I will come back and give an update to the commission on why that didn't occur. But I'll be open to any questions if there's any from the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Winningham. Any questions for Mr. Winningham on the progress moving into the new City Hall? Or City Hall update? Okay, no questions. It is 5 o'clock. At this time, we don't have any public hearings this evening, but it is time for the public that is present, that wishes to come forward, and has any comments that are not on our agenda, or any item that is on our agenda they wish to speak to. Please come forward, state your name, and let the City Commission know your concerns or your questions pertaining to items not on the agenda or on the agenda. If you're watching online, 701-456-7006.
The conference is currently empty. You will hear silence or music on hold when connected.
Again, if there are any members of the public that wishes to come forward and has any comments that are about items not on our agenda or on the agenda and wishes the city commission to hear them, please come forward, state your name, let us know your concerns or your questions. And if you're watching online, 701-456-7006. Anyone from the public? Seeing there is no one in the audience with any comments, hearing no one online, I'll close the public comment section. We'll move back into our reports. Our next item up is the town square update. Mr. Winningham?
And Mr. President, Commissioners, what I wanted to provide is just another, for this project, just a brief update on what we're seeing as far as progress. We do know we had some weather that slowed us down a little bit as far as how the progress is going. We expected that. What we didn't expect is during the initial evacuation or excavation of some of the foundation, what was discovered was there was some remaining piers and some remaining concrete and debris that wasn't identified. That was unforeseen. Some of that debris was removed. It did wind up having the contractor go and perform some of that excavation themselves, some remediation. That was a cost of approximately $45,000 that was currently covered under the owner's contingency fund, and it did extend us about 15 days on the timeline. I think we'll make up those depending on weather, but I just wanted to bring that forward. It is progressing with some of the footings. What you're seeing, if the public is driving by there, you're seeing a lot of work. Even today, there was a lot of work being done, even in this climate, that the footings and the foundation for the concrete have been excavated, and some was poured during right before the really tough part of December, before it got real cold. So that is progressing. There was a couple considerations that the architect, JLG, wanted to clarify. I just wanted to present that. There was a few costs regarding some of the materials. I know what we had during the meeting, during the bid and during the contract negotiation, we had talked about replacement products. There was some material that was for the panels. It was zinc. As my understanding right now is that that was an additional cost, or we were trying to save that $90,000 in cost. From what I understand, we went forward. The decision was to go forward with that zinc based on looking at the longevity of that material. And in addition to that, the cheaper product that we could have purchased appears that we would have had to potentially redo that product over a short time, 5 or 6 years, based on the weather. So we went forward and agreed with the architect, and that seems to be a fairly high cost, but the payoff will be in the longevity of the product. The second one that I wanted to bring forward was there was some discussion with JLG based on the last report we got from DDA, from the Dickinson Downtown Association, that since they are doing, at least at this point, well on their capital campaign, that there was considerations for them to add the products that we held off, the alternates. One of those alternates that we were considering was real ice versus synthetic ice, and I think that we didn't decide that as a commission, and I wanted to make sure that we bring that forward at the appropriate time. I don't know when that is right now, but I think that it'll be real short, meaning next commission meeting, I'll have to bring forward those costs and get a legitimate consideration from the commission on those costs. It's very hard to determine whether they're going to have the money since it's a capital campaign and those are pledges, but I think it'll at least be the data in front of the commission so you can determine whether real ice will be the best course of action. The other item that was discussed at the meeting was the size of the stage and the power considerations. And I think we have to get it right. And I think we want to make sure that we bring the data before the commission. And I would rather have changes or the amount of money that is being considered come before the commission very quickly so that we get it right. What we don't want to do is have a stage that's too low and underpowered. But based on what I'm hearing from the architects and from the last meeting, there was discussion whether that was correct. And I just want to make sure that when we bring that back before the commission, that all the facts are in front of you. Before we were given the what I would consider the owner's representation, which currently I believe that's me on the signature line, but it's essentially the commission that I'm representing. So I want to make sure that I provide that information to you and then you give me a direction to go forward.
Well, I agree with you. We don't need a stage that is for acoustic bands. We need, if we're going to have national acts that need to plug in, need room and need power, we need to get it right. Look forward to any of the updates to make sure that if those changes need to be made, we can make those changes. I'm happy to see that their fundraising is going well. I personally would rather see real ice. I think that eliminates a lot of the need for specialized skates like the Gleis would require. Again, though, I'd like to see the changes, on the cost in doing that, and if it sets back the project any. So by making that change.
Mr. President.
Mr. Oderman.
Mr. Winningham, what was their target for the fundraising for what we had already approved as a commission? Was it 2 or was it a little over 2? I thought it was like 2.1 or 2.2 or something like that they had to get everything that was, because we had committed up to 2 million.
They had 2 initially, and then they had the add-ons were an initial 400.
Yeah, because the total project cost that we approved was like 4 point. I guess I don't have it in front of me, but.
I don't want to misspeak on this, but the total costs initially were 5.2 million.
Mm-hmm.
Then we down selected a few of the alternates. It wound up coming in at about 4.2 million.
Yeah.
And the alternates weren't considered in that 4.2 million. So the city commission moved forward with the overall cost of the 4 million. We negotiated some of the contingency costs where we got it to 4 million. But we think that with the capital campaign, that this was going to happen. That was part of the discussion, was we were going to see the capital campaign in bringing in money or the pledges, and then we were going to come back and talk about the alternates, just so we can move the project along for just the timeline. We were running against that timeline. We're already set back almost 2 months, but I think that this commission made a good decision to just move forward, and then periodically we'd come back. I think that's where we're at now, is where we need to come back on the 1st of February. Unless the architects and the contractor thinks that we need to have a decision faster than that, then we'll wait till the 1st of February. But I think we're in the ballpark of getting all of the things that the DDA and the public initially, and this goes back all the way to 2018, where some of the public considerations and that's what they're functioning off of, that data. I couldn't tell you right now if real ice and synthetic ice are better. I just know that overall, if this is our one chance to get it right.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really great how well the fundraising has been going, and the alternates give them an additional shot in the arm from a fundraising standpoint, because once they get to a certain point, it might stagnate a little bit, and if there's the opportunity to go back out to somebody that isn't necessarily hasn't made up their mind yet, and say, hey, if you pony up your donation and make a pledge, we can maybe add this additional alternate to the downtown square. So I think it adds a little bit more of sizzle to the sale in terms of maybe getting somebody over the finish line in terms of a donation when those alternates are on the table, because they've done such a good job. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's really exciting how well the capital campaign has gone.
Any other questions for Mr. Winningham on the town square update? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, Public Safety Training Center update. Mr. Winningham?
And Mr. President, Commissioners, again, this is just a very high-level summary of what we've been discussing. As you'll recall, a few sessions ago, we talked briefly about what we would consider as the Public Safety Training Center. The Commission authorized a $30,000 architecture and exploration fee, essentially, to get us some data. We've had a couple of meetings since then with our architects to give an overview. We would like to bring that during the next commission, but I wanted to give just a brief summary of where we're at on that. We have a product available to show the commission. We'll do that on the 1st of February, and I just wanted to give the rough number. It is going to change, but rough order of magnitude, if we were to have $19 million of a project, we would have a fully funded public safety training center, which would include police and fire and an indoor public shooting range. These are all pre-decisional bits of information, and we've asked the architects and the contractor to look at different types of phasing and whether we can phase the process out. We've also considered the site location, which is our current fire safety center or fire training area, just to the south of 8th and State. Those are considerations we want to bring on the 1st of February, but I just wanted to give the opportunity for the commission to ask any questions as we prepare for that meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Winningham. Any questions for Mr. Winningham on the Public Safety Training Center?
Mr. President?
Mr. Orderman?
Mr. Winningham, with that indoor range, has there been any exploration of the potential for like a, I mean, in a lot of larger cities, those can be kind of an additional recreation type element for the community.
Open to the public?
Yeah, open to the public, but also maybe kind of a little bit of an enterprise type of element there. You know, you're selling ammo, you're selling different things out of that range. Have we looked into the business model of anything like that in other cities?
So one of the, Commissioner Oderman, one of the considerations for having the architects that we approved was they have done this in multiple cities throughout the U.S. And one of the things that they were able to show us is they were doing marketing for that specific business model. So a few places, one in Minnesota, and I believe one in Michigan, they gave us some data that we could also provide at the next meeting that shows some of the business plan that at least pays some of the operating costs. But I think that's the benefit of having this architecture do it, is they have done this in the past where they have shown that you can have public support and also the marketing for public support to get people aware. It would be I believe the only indoor range that we'd have available to the citizens. And we're still looking at what that would look like, how many lanes that would be. We'd like to also offer some of the survey, for public comment, to see the legitimate need for that. I think that would help as we go forward on how we're going to request for financing, how we're going to finance this. I think the public needs to have an awareness of what that would look like so that we can potentially even seek either a revenue bond or do something that we'd have to have a vote for. I think that's one of the few ways we'll get this done. But I think the key will be the public partnership that we have, offering this as a way for the public to have a place to do indoor shooting.
And Stark County has stepped up and said they will contribute also.
That's great.
So once we get the final tally dollars-wise, I feel that reaching out to Billings County, Dunn County law enforcement, other surrounding law enforcement agencies, Highway Patrol, and to include the North Dakota Army National Guard because they have an MP unit here. I think those could all be beneficial and generate some other needed revenue to help bring this forward. From the get-go, I've always said this has to be a public shooting range. Because there is a need there, and I can tell you, if we survey the public there, I think there will be an overwhelming want for some lane time.
Well, and I think from a funding standpoint, you can make a pretty strong case for the 8-county area, but also expand that outside of our southwest corner here, because wouldn't it be best to train our law enforcement in our own backyard? And people that are familiar with the area, familiar with the different counties and things like that. I mean, I think northern South Dakota, you know, all the way over maybe to Bismarck, something like this, you can make a strong argument for those counties to help fund something like this, because they're going to benefit in the long run.
Indeed.
And Commissioners, Mr. President, Commissioners, the Leo A. Daly is the architect that we're working with, and so for the public, if they were to search for Leo A. Daly and see some of the projects that are on their websites, that you know, they focus on public safety training centers, and so we have considered this as something that we would do, and I want to say on the cheap, but something that we would do that's very cost effective with the types of indoor use that we were looking at. But it would also give our ability to sustain our world-class training. Our police and fire, with the limited numbers that we have, they do so many things that are unseen. And in order to do that, in order to be successful, they have to have a high level of training. And it's often hard to go out and do that training in other places. And so this goes in line with what we're going to talk about during the commission retreat, for a strategic look at being the regional hub for training, that we would bring others into this location for police and fire, that I think we would become the regional hub. Just like we are with our partnership with DSU and our partnership with the public schools, with our fire training, and with our current law enforcement training as we are currently postured. So if there's no other questions, I look forward to presenting this with the team on the 1st of February to give more insight into what we've discovered.
Hearing no other questions, we'll move into what you just mentioned, Mr. Winningham, the commission retreat dates. You have 2 dates up, the 31st or the 1st of April, 31st of March, 1st of April. Commissioners?
So let me, Mr. President and Commissioners, I know there's some timeline that we're competing against. The National League of Cities has now published their calendar. I believe it was either this morning or over the weekend, in somewhat of a surprise to me, but it did get published, and so they're looking at hosting their National League of Cities during that same week. That is their spring. The name slips me. I didn't want to say what it was, but their spring symposium for National League of Cities, or North Dakota League of Cities, and we could still do it. It would just require participation if commissioners were going down to Bismarck or over to Bismarck and then coming back. We could also consider pushing it the following week, but we run into some other timeline considerations for it was Good Friday. So I'm open to dates.
Commissioner Oderman, the convention is what day?
April 1st and 2nd.
Right.
In Bismarck.
In Bismarck.
So even though we thought we'd give alternates, we did have an additional alternate the 24th or 25th of March. It would tighten up our timeline. What we were doing internally as a staff is we were doing an executive retreat, essentially a 4-hour rehearsal prior to the commission, but we were doing that the week prior, so we could push that. But I think for the commission, if we'd like to slip that to the left, we would offer then the 24th or 25th of March as a retreat date.
How does the 24th look for most of you?
And that's a Thursday, Friday. 24th is a Thursday.
24th would work for me.
Those days are okay with me.
Yeah, either day works for me.
Why don't we go with the
Okay, Mr. President, then we will schedule that and look at some of the details to produce an agenda as for meeting requirements. Essentially, we would just do a day. We would like to do an 8 a.m. start time and go through a normal business day, probably 4, maybe 5 o'clock, depending on the topics. But it's really to preheat it. It's really the strategic look or 5 strategic priorities for the city. It will be in line with our comprehensive plan as we make some adjustments to the comprehensive plan being updated. That'll be the primary topics. And then there's a few outlier topics that we are asking city staff to prepare. And some of those are potential incentives for certain skill sets with employees. But primarily it's just to continue to get our services right for the public. But overall, that retreat will focus on the strategic plan for the city at the 5 years, at 5 years out. So if there's no questions with that, there'll be details forthcoming, and we will schedule that for the 24th of March.
All right, thank you, Mr. Winningham. And the last report is the state of the city, February 3rd.
And Mr. President and Commissioners, that was just to identify that, to keep that on the board. February 3rd has been identified as the date from the Chamber of Commerce to host that at the
August House.
August House. I was thinking, what is that name? August House, which is a venue that's just outside of the city limits. That's new within the area. The Chamber of Commerce is going to host that event. We will have Mayor Decker as the guest speaker, one of the guest speakers, and then it will be a luncheon and then a panel, much like last year, only better, apparently. So just wanted to make sure that everybody's aware. We do have a table. I think at this point we have 16 seats available, and we were just asking for commissioners to come up on the net to Miss Rita Benstock to see if we have enough chairs for you and your guests, and then we would offer those other positions to city staff.
Okay, any comments on the state of city? Questions? Hearing none, we'll move into public safety. First item up, we have the fire department, and we have a fire truck bid. And this will be presented by Fire Chief Presnell.
Thank you, President Decker and Commissioners. The bid before you is for the purchase of a 100-foot aerial apparatus. Back in December, we went out to bid for a new aerial apparatus to replace a nearly 30-year-old aerial truck that we have. We did receive one bid. It was from. I'm just going to talk loud. Okay?
That'll work.
We did receive one bid. It came from McQueen Emergency, and it came out to about $1.487 million, so slightly under what we planned on with the 1.5. We are looking at a lease purchase, and this would be purchased with funds that we receive in insurance refund premiums. That has been the way that we have purchased apparatus in the past. We currently have about $400,000 sitting in that fund, and by the time this apparatus would actually be ready for delivery, we would probably see another $400K in the bank. So we'd have approximately about 4 or 5 years of lease purchase, extending it out to about a 10 or 15-year lease purchase. So So fire department staff does recommend approval, and I'd gladly answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Chief Presnell. Commissioners, any questions for Chief Presnell on this apparatus lease? And this is again for a 100-foot, in layman's terms, ladder truck.
Ladder truck, yes, sir.
Yes. And we're replacing one that is, you stated, 30 years old?
By the time, if this was approved, by the time it was delivered, it'd be about 30 years old. So we did kind of plan with the extended production times. That's why we kind of came forward with this when we did. We knew that it was going to be about a year and a half to 2 years out for delivery.
Is that typically the build time on
Not
some?
usually, no. Usually about a year, but with just the current production environment, they're looking at about a year and a half to 2 years.
Any questions, commissioners? I know these things aren't getting any cheaper. You buy 'em.
That was my question, Mr. Winningham, Mr. Chief Presnell. Any concerns budget-wise?
Commissioner Oderman, so the budget, it is budgeted, but it's also being, we're also using the insurance replacement costs.
Okay.
But I'll let Chief, it's his budget, so.
Yeah, we did budget 1.5, we're anticipating the 1.5. But like I mentioned before, we will be paying for it out of our insurance reserve. About annually, we get about $230K back from the insurance premiums from the state. And we should see that for at least 2 more years guaranteed. And we did plan on, if that does happen to go away for some reason, there is contingency there to pay off that lease.
All right, great.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'd look for a motion on this purchase and this fire truck, ladder truck bid.
Mr. President, move to approve.
We have a motion to approve the bid for the ladder truck for the fire department.
Second.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Frederick, second by Commissioner Walla. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Our next item up is the Police Department monthly report, and this will be handled by Lieutenant Clauser. Oh, welcome.
I'm going to give. Mr. President, Commissioners, thank you opportunity to come tonight. I don't know if they're going to pop it up on the PowerPoint here or not for you guys. Chance,
There it is.
Chief Presnell is kind enough to go grab me that clicker. I'll do my best tonight in the December monthly report to highlight the big things I feel most relevant for you guys that you may want to hear. Always open, obviously, to questions and catching me midstream to elaborate on anything I may jump over that you want to know more about. But as it relates, so total number of calls, as we saw in December, 1,969. That works out to be about 63 per day. To look at it contextually, kind of on a smaller scale there. The trend is continuing to hold, as we've told you guys in the last few months throughout our cold spell here. Our total number just slightly lower than what it was in November. No surprise with the holidays and some of the cold spell upon us to that end. Some of the top stats that you're going to see right there: speak with an officer at 76, and they all the way to the bottom with our care required being 12. Suspicious persons vehicles kind of hugging up there with the lead as well. There you go, that's better. Our total accidents were 97. That's a decent number, not surprising with December and the month that we had there with the weather that came through. A few of those drizzly blizzard type days with some icy streets. So 3 of those being injury, which we always like to see those at a goose egg. I don't have anything I could elaborate on those injuries. Sometimes you guys like to hear maybe a few more details about those, but 25 hit and runs. And so that's a decent number tucked in there at 97. Total number of traffic stops sitting at 341, 181 citations and 100 warnings. That leaves us shy on the math by about 60, so we had about 60 verbal warnings in there. So officers operating at that level for the month of December. Our warrants were up for the month pretty significantly at 53 from that just mid-40s in November. The rest of them, just about to say theft and fraud, up significantly over the holidays. Some of that is unsurprising, and for obvious reasons, Christmas and such upon us. Our sex offense, you see that there's a big spike in that. We're up at 5 for the month, and there's a number of different categorical things that fall underneath sex offense numbers, but just a few highlights there. And maybe the other one there, if you slide down to the bottom, disorderly conduct's at 13. A pretty drastic increase from November when we were sitting near 5 or less. Behavioral health, continue to get that number in front of you as these talks in the community continue to urge forward. 98 total. 16 of those suicidal threats. 65 welfare checks in general, be it from family members or friends or loved ones. 7 mental health. Just to highlight again here, our Badlands Human Services, one of the things our officers are continuing to use is that star 211 that we reference to individuals that may be in need of some mental health services that we can provide them, like on site over the phone. They don't always take it, but it is a nice addition to be able to provide these people who may be in kind of some times of trouble. Some of the trainings worth noting to you guys are our investigators attended an advanced Snapchat, TikTok, those types of platforms, trying to dive into the continued trends that exist in those social media realms. We had our 4th quarter virtual simulator training. All of our officers went through that. Tourniquet application, self-aid, first aid was a big one received by the officers. We had a special operations conference down in Bismarck. We sent 4 of our staff down there. Interviewing, one investigator and a Intoxilizer 8000, which is related to DUIs. Sent 2 of our newer officers there for certification. We had 23 new cases in CID. Those numbers up in front of you. It's fairly straightforward. I wanted to highlight one here that falls into January. December, January being our, because I know that there's a number of you guys that received calls, information, questions from the community on our champ shooting that we had down there. So the quick update on that, because our criminal investigative division heavily involved in that. We still have 2 fugitives at large on that we are hoping to locate here sooner than later. That's continuing to go on. 2 of the individuals that we have arrested, there was a press release done on. There have been charges that have been enhanced by our Stark County State's Attorney's Office to attempted murder. And so just a couple tidbits there related to big cases, I guess, for the criminal investigative division. Currently, they're running at 48 open cases. We did have a big burglary at one of our commercial establishments in town. There was over $10,000 that we're trying to work to. There were some Badlands Crime Stoppers tips and some Facebook information sent out there trying to locate or help identify a suspect that you may have saw. We had a large-scale call-out by some staff on a suicidal barricaded subject that ended up being solved and came to a peaceful term, and an arrest was made on that, but that was near the holiday, Christmas as well. Calls for service in our schools, middle school in the lead right there at 27. Can't tell you what those compared to for last month, but some of the highlights that in those numbers from the high school, 9 out of the 17 that they had there were cited with juvenile summonses. Our Dickinson High School Academy Expo showcasing the police department, we were involved in that. A lot of the vaping, which is a big issue for us among our youth, some presentations there as they continue on. Middle school, we had 13 out of the 27 numbers where we issued juvenile summonses. We had 4 suicidal student calls, 4 fights, 3 calls to speak with a student about behaviors and consequences, 5 investigations towards threats made by students towards staff, things as such, 1 indecent exposure in the school. And then down at the very bottom there, their elementary schools just had 3 calls for service, but the big one that was a nationwide TikTok viral sort of post, being the National School Shooter Day, that took a lot of resources by the police department. We had a number of individuals called in. We made sure to address any security concerns that our schools may have had extra staff at the schools on this particular day to help kind of calm the storm that this thing created, that I know some of you guys are familiar with.
Lieutenant Clauser, how much easier would your guys' job be if they just shut down social media?
If I try to speak precisely, it certainly would help. It certainly would help, Commissioner Oderman, yes. Our records department up front, fingerprints continue to stay pretty consistent flow in and out of those doors. Sex offenders, 19 registrations and or updates with them. 1 new offender registration into town, and a couple of employees we sent off to our neighbors, which that's important training for the purpose of our federal reporting that we're mandated to do, and we're audited by the FBI, so we got to have that in line for the city and the department, make sure we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's. Dispatch's calls for service were up just a smidgen from November all the way down, as you see there, and so I don't have anything that jumps out at me, I think, to elaborate on other than just that. Our calls for service for animals were about 104 for the month, ranging from the barking down to merely surrendered. 64 at large, significant. And of the, I believe 70 that were total number there, there's currently none that still, well, excuse me, there's 2 dogs that still remain at the shelter out of the 44, and there is 5 cats out of the 26. None have been euthanized, and I know a lot of listeners that pay attention after the fact like to see that. So most of them are going back somewhere or into good hands. Just another outlay there on a number of from the 70 total impounded, a breakdown. There are a couple bites in there, but again, I can't explain or expound on those much further than that. The community events for you guys, as you may have saw or not, we were heavily involved with the Cops and Kids. We served 44 kids in the area. They each got $100 to go spend. We had about 25 of our officers that showed up on their own in uniform to take the kids around, and so we had a lot of feedback and positive remarks from the community on this event here. It's one of the officers' funner times of the year, to be able to go spend money that's not theirs and make a kid smile. So we donated some food back to the Amen Food Pantry. There, some of the familiar faces that you see. Mr. Officer Kubik just recently up in front of you. There's Officer Hoppin and Sergeant Wallace. Promotional things as the wheel continues to turn for us. Detective Sergeant Travis Lyons, newly in his position. That was my vacated position for a little over 10 years, and that I was in for a little over 10 years. And then there's the officers that you had up in front of you for swearing in, Officer Knapp and Officer Kubik again. Down at the bottom right there is Officer Abby Johnson, who was in front of you several months ago, but now has recently completed the basic academy and is back with us, happy to be home and on the streets serving you guys. Here's our Christmas photo for you guys. Got a little bit of the squinchy eyes from the sun that was coming down on us on that afternoon, but we just want to highlight so you guys know that the community support for us continues to glow, and we're appreciative of that, knowing that we're not perfect. And over the holiday season, the amount of food and treats and different things that came in was remarkable. Every day there was loads and loads coming through the door, more than what we could do some days, but pretty special to be serving the community that we are in now. And I'd entertain any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you, Lieutenant Clauser. Any questions for Lieutenant Clauser on the police's monthly report? Well, thank you so much for a job well done, and the whole police department and staff continuing to protect our community. We'll move right into your second item, Lieutenant Clauser. You have an MOU for the Siren project.
Yeah, Chief Dossinger had provided me the documentation here. I think you guys may have it up in front of you as well, but just that it explained everything as an order, had forwarded on for recommendation for approval. Essentially, what that is we are transitioning over to a new radio program. It's a statewide program. I think that it's going a little bit slower than what they had initially anticipated, but as part of this, we are at a particular phase where a structure needs to go into the area by our water tower up on 35th Street Southwest. And so I think all of the brains has been done on this, and everything is pretty much set to go. And Chief Dossinger recommended approval for moving it up.
Thank you, Lieutenant Clauser. Any questions for Lieutenant Clauser on the MOU for the Siren project? Or if there are no questions or comments, I'd look for a motion on this MOU.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve the MOU by Commissioner Oderman,
Second.
second by Commissioner Frederick. Any further questions or comments on this MOU for the Siren project? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mrs. Soboluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Next item up, we have a maintenance support agreement for Indema.
Mr. President, Commissioners, this is an annual budgeted item for the Dickinson Police Department. This particular program, if you're wondering what is IDEMIA, is our electronic fingerprint system that is up front for when citizens need to come in for fingerprints related to their different jobs. It was referenced in the report. Those numbers referenced in our monthly report, and this is the system that those numbers exist with. And so the Chief Dossinger, again, forwarding it on to me, just saying that he felt everything was in line as it has been and moving forward with the information provided to you, and recommended approval.
Thank you, Lieutenant Clauser. Any questions for Lieutenant Clauser on the Indema?
Mr. Winningham, if this is a budgeted item, why do we have to approve it?
Yeah, Commissioner Oderman, this is before you because we didn't want to we want to be able to sign a contract.
Okay.
And so that's why it's coming before the commission. Even though it's budgeted, it's an agreement that needs to be signed by the mayor.
Okay. Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Oderman,
Second.
second by Commissioner Soboluk. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Soboluk?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Our next item up. Move into engineering. We have the 2022 mill and overlay, and this is a consideration to approve a resolution to be presented by interim city engineer Marshak.
Evening, President Decker, Commissioners. Before you, enclosed in your packet, is a preliminary engineering report and a resolution to create the Special Improvement District number 2022-01-1 for the 2022 Mill and Overlay project. This project is included in the 2022 capital improvement project budget, and areas were chosen based on the 2019 pavement management report, along with field visits, preliminary estimates, and staff discussion. 5 areas were presented at the commission meeting on October 5th of 2021, and Zone 5 was chosen based on a recommendation from the staff. James Kidrowski with KLJ is here to go through this item for you and give us some updates. He can help us answer any questions for the preliminary engineering report. And please jump in, James, and if you have any questions, just let us know.
Thank you, Loretta. Mayor Decker and Commissioners, good evening. Just here to give an update on the 2022 mill and overlay. First off, just want to set off the goals of this project. This mill and overlay is an annual street restoration project where we target a certain area of the city most in need of a new asphalt pavement overlay, and also work on concrete repairs and infill as needed. One other aspect of this project is improving surface drainage issues in these areas that we're working, and now would be the time to address those while we're working in the streets. As Loretta mentioned, back in October, we came forward with a couple different alternatives, different zones in the cities to look at. It was Zone 5 that was selected. Zone 5 is a residential area on the south side of town between West Broadway and west of South Main. And we'll get into that in the next slide. I've got a few maps to share with you. And tonight we are looking to approve a resolution to create a special improvement district. And I'm sure, as you're all aware, there was a resolution from back in 2019 that limited these assessments for street restoration projects to include only the cost for certain items, those items being the curb and gutter replacements and the sidewalk replacements. In no way is any asphalt items to be included. That includes milling the surface as well as the new asphalt overlays or any patch repairs that are needed. Also, any ADA ramps to be installed at intersections are not to be assessed. Attached to this resolution is a preliminary engineering report done by KLJ. This report includes the district map as well as more detailed maps highlighting all the different areas where curb and gutter and sidewalk replacements are needed. And in the back there are also preliminary assessment amounts for each parcel involved in the district. Keep in mind that those amounts are just preliminary estimates. The final estimates may change. That is dependent on the unit prices that we get from the lowest bidder, as well as the final quantities that are measured in the field. We estimated that the construction cost for this project to be just over $4 million. That's including assessed and non-assessed items. That's just all construction costs. The assessed items total to be about $1.5 million. So that represents about a third of the cost to be assessed. And I'd also just like to look forward to upcoming schedules. The city moves to approve this resolution to create a special improvement district. We're giving ourselves about a week from today to compile notification letters to all the landowners, as well as add to the paper. And once the letters are sent out, we will start a 30-day protest period as per the Century Code. And that's likely to start January 26th, including on February 25th. And within that time period, we're also have tentatively scheduled a public hearing meeting on February 8th. That's where we'll just invite the public to come meet. A couple KLJ engineers will be there, as well as the engineering department, to answer any questions they have about the project or about the city's policy for assessments. Also, we're looking at bidding this project in March, if all goes well, and starting construction in May, if not earlier. And that's all the information I have. I'd just like to click through the maps and point out this is the district on an aerial map outlined. And the next shows an alternate look. This is just without the aerial map, and the different colors are just all the different subdivisions involved with all the blocks and lot numbers called out. Now I'd like to open up for any questions commissioners may have.
Commissioners, any questions on this special improvement district? Comments? I know there's a few on here that are quite substantial. If you look through, they have large portions of curb and gutter and to include sidewalk, it looks like. I don't know, I did drive through there today. I didn't pay close attention to how much sidewalk. I was looking more curb and gutter. But looks like there is some substantial amount of sidewalks that also need to be either replaced or they don't exist, I would guess.
Yeah, that's true. There are quite a few areas where sidewalk just doesn't exist, and we're infilling that. And part of that gets assessed as well.
And this, again, just for the public's information, Mrs. Marshak, if, once they see this and they're noticed, they can take it upon themselves to put in the sidewalk.
That is correct. We just ask that they reach out to the engineering department so that we can coordinate our efforts with their contractor.
Right. As we have in the past. So.
Correct.
Any other comments or questions on this special improvement district?
Did we ever determine or find an answer on why we're levying that 1% to 2% administration fee on this? I think it was about a year ago that, well, a little less than a year ago.
Commissioner Oderman, as one of my report items, I just wanted to bring up and continue this discussion about that, in addition to some discussions we had about some assessments that seemed high last year and the previous year, and there had been some discussions about possibly addressing those in different ways.
Okay.
So we can sure have that discussion, and we can address those between now and I think as we move forward with the project, and those assessments potentially happen if the project moves forward and is not protested out.
Because, I mean, just being familiar with this area of town, I mean, this isn't the most affluent neighborhood, and some of these are very substantial.
Yes.
So this could be this is a heavier lift for
and you
several
can
of
see,
these.
Commissioner Oderman, you can see there's a lot of rental property in there.
Yeah.
You see the same names
That's
pop,
true.
pop
Yeah.
quite a bit. So that's something too that the owners that are.
Yeah, you're right.
It's maintenance. So there's a lot of the same names on there.
Thank you, Mr. Marshak.
Any other questions? Comments? Look up the resolution quick.
I believe it's 01-2022. Ms. Winko wants to confirm that.
01-2022. That would be correct. The first one, you get the first
one
one.
of the year.
You get the first one. So if there are no more comments or questions, I'd look for a motion on resolution 01-2022.
I'll move to approve Resolution 01-2022.
We have a motion to approve resolution 01-2022 by Commissioner Walla,
Second.
second by Commissioner Soboluk. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Ms. Walla,
Aye.
Mrs. Soboluk,
Aye.
Mr. Frederick,
Aye.
Mr. Oderman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Kiedarowski.
Yes, thank you.
Our next item up, we have an Apex Amendment, number 1, to Task Order number 2021-1, our State Avenue Improvement. And again, this will be handled by Interim City Engineer Marshak.
Thank you. Enclosed in your packet is an amendment to the State Avenue Urban Roads Project, which runs from Villard to 15th Street West. This amendment with Apex Engineering Group is for final design services and construction documents related to the project. The original task order amount was $110,895. There have been no prior amendments to this amendment, and this amendment is in the amount of $114,200, which brings the total adjusted task order amount to $225,900. $1,095. City engineering staff recommends approval of the Apex amendment. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Thank you, Mrs. Marshak. Any questions for Mrs. Marshak or staff on this amendment?
I do have a question. I'm just confused on how it completely doubled, or that what we had approved before and now it's doubled. What was the difference, or what's the cost, or what's the change?
The way the amendment, or the way the task order was set up was we split the project work up into different pieces. So the original portion did environmental work and the preliminary design, and that all gets submitted and to DOT as an urban roads project. And now that we've made it to that point in the project, now they're coming back to move on to this final design phase and the construction document phase. So
it's like
really
the next step. It's not
correct.
It's not an.
It's not additional that we weren't anticipating.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Marshak, I think the question has arisen with some of the development that's happening in that area along States, especially in the area where the new sports complex is.
Sure.
Has this been worked into this design phase, especially with the amount of traffic and the possibility too, as States continue to 15th, and the discussion that the city has had in the past about possibly extending 15th. I guess the biggest thing that I'm asked is with the lights, and then why we don't have a turn signal on 21st and States, why we don't have lights on 15th and States, and if the sports complex is going to go in, is there going to be an additional set of lights at 6th and States? Because with the increased traffic, and I know the preliminary design that we've seen as commission, or just a rough design on the sports complex, does not complete that road, but we all know that that road is going to bisect that property. All the traffic cannot go out on the 13th from that sports complex. So that is going to create additional issues over on States.
So I think with this project, that's kind of out of the scope to look at that signalization. As an urban roads project, this project itself had to be put on the STIP years in advance. So years in advance of our knowing that this project was coming forward. So those kinds of items couldn't be included in with that project because it's kind of after the fact. You know, we had to put that in years in advance. However, staff has been working with the engineer that's doing the work for the ball fields to coordinate so that we can make good decisions about traffic and what those turning movements are going to look like, and how that area is going to develop. So we're trying to do what we can within our project, but some of those bigger items are out of the scope, and we'll have to look at them moving forward.
So this is basically a reconstruction of States without any signal changes.
We're looking at street lighting, we're looking at sidewalk.
Okay.
One thing we did look at,
I'll make a
Mayor
comment.
Decker,
Sure.
is the high school, which has some issues with turning movements in and out of the parking lots. And so we've done some coordination to adjust how those flow to improve that functionality.
Mr. Winningham, you had a comment?
Yeah, Mr. President. Sorry, Ms. Marshak. Mr. President, Commissioners. So it's still early in what was the, I think it's called now the Sanford Health Sports Complex. We have yet to receive an application within the city. So the staff has done pre-application work this week. Last week there was some communication with Parks and Rec and with DSU to try to get that moving so that city staff isn't behind. So we've done a lot of pre-work without formal documentation. And that's, it's no small thing, because we are acting with only the things that you've seen as a commission, just the idea that it's going to be built, they're going forward with the project, it's been advertised in the news. All of that stuff is great, but it allows, the city staff has no real authority to do anything other than guess. So we're asking for that information in a formal manner, in a pre-application for that site, and so that we can actually put details within the city staff, so they can put some time into that project. There's a number of considerations that would go into our road networks. No different than what we've seen when in the past there was a design for what you saw as 15th, which really the bulk of the property owners is Dickinson Public Schools and NDU Research. We think it would be prudent for the city to consider what that extension of 15th would look like. To answer your question, Mr. President, for flow of traffic, there's only two avenues of approach going into the west, and that's 21st and Fairway. And so that will bottleneck a lot of traffic. And so that has to be considered as we go forward. But that is something that that staff is working on to get more formalization within, before the commission.
And I know the players have to step up and produce documentation for us, and I know that's frustrating for staff, and I just keep seeing news of groundbreakings and other things, and we're just waiting. I know you're just waiting for something.
But your comments are relevant as far as how are we planning to handle that. I just wanted to share that the process in moving forward with this type of funding for this project was way in advance of what we knew of this project. So it wasn't something we could add into the project. But moving forward might be something we need to look at.
Understandable. Thank you. Commissioners, any further questions, comments on this task order?
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Oderman,
Second?
second by Commissioner Sobeluk. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Our next item up, we have a report from Interim City Engineer Marshik. This is a resolution, a report on Resolution 39-2019, discussion on our special assessment policy for costs for sidewalks, curb, and gutter improvements.
Thank you, President Decker, Commissioners. Last year, when we were going through our process of our mill and overlay special assessment district, there was some discussion about some properties that received large assessments. And as part of that discussion, there were some different ideas thrown around. And last year, our approach was to look at the cost for the drainage areas and take those costs in as the city and not assess any areas of concrete that needed to be removed to make these drainage improvements. And that helped with some of those large assessments that we saw on last year's mill and overlay. So in looking at this year's PER for our mill and overlay, as was mentioned, there are a number of large assessments. And so I just wanted to bring that forward for discussion. If there were some ideas that the commission had for moving forward, capping was discussed previously in the resolution 3919. It talks about the concrete cost that residents or property owners pay 100% of that. You know, do we look at reducing that to a percentage? Do we look at each high cost assessment on a case by case? Because some of those properties are owned by one person, or for this area, there's some lots where multiple homes residences are on one lot. So the assessment looks really large unless you look at it and split it up among the dwelling units. Then it maybe isn't so daunting. Extending out how long we do the assessment. There's lots of things that we can do as a city if we want to address those assessments. If that is something that maybe you're fine with how the resolution is written and how we move forward, then staff will just continue as we had done in the past and follow the resolution as it's written. But I just wanted to take the time to discuss some options that were mentioned in the past and get a feel for how you as a commission would like staff to move forward on this year's resolution.
Mr. President,
Schroederman?
I don't know how I feel about a cap, because you know, if the work is done and that's the cost of the work, then you know, that's the cost of the work. The issue I've had in the past is basically going to citizens and saying, we're going to do this work. If you can't pay for it up front, by the way, we're going to assess you a 2% administration fee. And if we're paying for we're not financing this work. I didn't feel like it was right to basically charge interest on work that we're forcing our citizens to have done on their property. And basically saying, hey, here's a $5,000 bill, and by the way, if you can't pay for it up front, we're going to assess an interest rate on it. That's something I've always really struggled with.
I don't have a good answer for that. I'm not sure how that was generated, and I wish Linda was here that could maybe have some reasoning behind where that came from.
I mean, typically, every city that assesses has a rate. They charge an interest rate.
Yeah, I know that.
I mean, it's super typical. If you go to,
yeah.
I mean, you go to Bismarck or wherever, it's the same thing. So, my only question is, so if the homeowner went and replaced the curb and gutter and the sidewalk himself, they wouldn't be making these drastic drainage changes that we do when we go and tear a whole street out.
Sure.
So, I don't think that they should be responsible for any of that. It should be the cost of the curb, lineal foot per, how many ever lineal, and the cost of the sidewalk per lineal foot. That's it.
Okay.
I mean, not that we're going to tear up the whole block and put a handicapped ADA thing in their corner. That shouldn't be their cost.
I think the handicaps are left out now.
Yeah, I mean, it should be whatever our curb per foot cost is for the project and whatever our sidewalk per foot, lineal foot cost is for the sidewalk. That should be it.
Okay. I think that's worked well last year when we did it that way. I think that was clear to property owners how we were separating that out, and we sure can do that again for this year.
I think that was what we used last year, and it did work.
I mean, looking at that, some of those big assessments are huge lots that don't have sidewalk on them. I mean, so they've gotten by for all these years without sidewalks, so it's, you know.
And we're trying to stay consistent with our sidewalk policy, which
Yes.
we have
That is true.
for the last multitude of years is, as Commissioner Frederick said, a lot of these individuals got away with no sidewalks for years. And now we're just staying consistent as a city and having them placed. I mean, you look at the one property coming down just on 22, on the west side of 22, that hill. There hasn't been a sidewalk there since I was a kid and lived on the south side. And now it's gonna have a sidewalk, you know, so. I think it's just being consistent as a city. The discussion, we can look at that fee, but I agree with Commissioner Frederick. We do charge a finance fee because we are using city dollars to a degree to finance this project over a term. Now, I've argued in the past that we on some of these larger ones we could possibly go longer, so it's not such a huge impact. But
well,
I don't. We treat them all equally, or we all say they're all. Right now, typically, are we doing 10-year?
Correct.
tenure. So, I mean, maybe on some of these, anything that's above $10,000, we go 15 years, just to, or whatever the commission decides is a.
I guess I still struggle with that, because it's, what are you paying for with that administrative fee? Like, because what are you administering, and what is our revenue that we generate off of those, that 1% to 2% fee? It's probably a drop in the bucket in terms of the city standpoint, but it's probably not a drop in the bucket for that citizen. And we need to do what's, I don't know, maybe this is just idealist in me, but like, we're telling these people, hey, you have to spend money that you might not have budgeted because the city decided that we're gonna fix your sidewalk. And yeah, that's great, and you're providing improvement to their property and things like that, but you're doing that, but then you're also saying, hey, plus an additional 2%. And I haven't been able to get a good answer on what we're actually administering, and I've asked this 2 years in a row. And I'm sorry, but it's not a good enough answer to just say other cities do it.
Well, I mean, there is time involved, I would guess.
A loan that they don't have a choice whether or not they're going to take.
On 25,000, it's $12 a month. At 2%.
And that would be kind of the top of the scale, the 25,000.
I just took the highest number I saw in here.
Yeah, but you're not but that's $12 a month on top of the expenditure of what the project costs. Because if it's a $5,000 bill, you still got $5,000 plus that per month.
My only argument is the sidewalk and curb and gutter are the homeowner's responsibility. If we weren't willing to assess like we used to never do, that money would have to come out of their pocket up front, or they'd have to borrow their own money to fix it, or, if your sidewalk in front of your house is tore up or broken, it's your responsibility to replace it.
I guess my point is that the city's not out any money if we assess that, because we're paying for it up front. This project is paid for. We're not financing it. I would understand if the city was financing it, charging a finance or administration fee, but we're not. To me, it's a nice way to make an extra 2% on a project that we are forcing citizens to do.
Commissioner Odom, I'll make a comment. I know we've explored this topic, and I thought we had responded, but we'll do some staff work, because I think there's a better answer. I get what you're asking, and I remember the conversation. I thought we had answered the question sufficiently before, but I think it's really the lost, it's lost capital revenue. Anytime the city uses public funds for the citizen, we are essentially losing that cash revenue from somewhere else, whether that could be putting that into an investment, even though, well, right now we might have some bond yield that are increasing. It's been very low for the last couple of years, but I think what we intend to do is make sure that money that we've already received in tax revenue isn't just used inappropriately. But I think that's the question that we have to answer to you to find out what that difference is. It might not be 2%. The administrative fee may be less than that. But I really think what the answer was, it's lost cash revenue. If that cash we have to use in order to fund those projects, we're not able to use that in an investment or other vehicle in order to make sure that we're using the citizens' money wisely, because it's targeted at those special assessments, not for the city as an ad valorem. So that's really what the topic is. We're having to use funds that everybody else is providing to the city for those specific sidewalks. But I think the question was, we should look at how we do our sidewalk plan in general, and maybe we get to the point where we don't have to consider raising taxes across the board, property taxes, because we have enough budgeted to do a sidewalk program citywide.
Okay, so if the argument is that we're raising these people's property values, aren't we going to see that 1% to 2% on the property tax revenue that would generate as a result of the increased property valuation? How many times do we have to dip into this pocket? How many times do we have to dip into the taxpayer's pocket? Because we're getting this 1% to 2% on this mill and overlay, and then their property values are going to go up as a result of the mill and overlay, and then we're going to increase our property tax revenue as a result of the increase in property tax valuation. Let's just keep our hand in the taxpayer's pocket.
So, Commissioner, I'm going to roll back my comments. I'm not arguing.
I know you're not. I'm
saying I want to give you a sufficient answer. I don't.
Yeah. No. I'm not trying to be argumentative with you, Mr. Winningham. I just like this is something that gets me, because I just feel like we are like over and over again we're trying to justify additional fees that we place on our citizens and taxes that we place on our citizens, and I think this is one that we could probably eat.
And Commissioners, Mr. President, Commissioners, I think that I agree. I think there's creative ways that just to say that we may have other revenue. If you look at the oil prices, that's one of the benefits of living in the state of North Dakota, living in Dickinson, is we benefit from all those that need oil. And I think we're going to see some of our ways that when we do our budget cycle this year to consider those, especially with how we're doing our capital improvement plan. That may include not having to do some of these special assessments. I think it's a great idea. I just don't have a sufficient answer right now, but I think that's a good topic that we have to look at, especially during the 2023 budget cycle. We're trying to speed that up this year, so we're not racing towards September.
Loretta or Rita, can you send the resolution out to us?
There's actually a copy in that PER document. I think it might be page 7. But there is a copy of that resolution attached in there.
On which document?
The mill and overlay had the preliminary engineering report. It's located in there. Oh, page 4. Thank you. I thank you for your input on this item, and if you have other thoughts that come to you after this, please reach out and let staff know, and we will move forward at this time with drainage costs not assessed as we did last year. And if we want to have additional discussion, we sure can move forward with this year's mill and overlay and address those topics.
Thank you, Mrs. Marshak. Next item up is our 2022 community rating system.
Thank you, Mayor Decker. This year, our community rating system, which is part of the NFIP program and deals with flood prevention. We had our annual construction certificate review, which we completed successfully. And thinking that was over, I was planning to bring that forward to you, but then they reached out to let us know that we have now been in the program 5 years, and we are due for our 5-year cycle verification. So we are currently working on that to move forward through the process, and that comes to a remote visit meeting on March 17th of this year. We are in grade 9, which is kind of an entrance level program, and we're working towards trying to improve that rating. So we'll see how we do, if we have enough added documentation to move up that number. In addition to that, the CRS also amended their policies, and so we are trying to get on board with their new requirements and make sure that we're meeting those. And as part of this cycle verification, we work with their staff to make sure that we're meeting all those requirements. So far, so good. That's what I have for you this evening. Any questions on the CRS item?
Commissioners, any questions?
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. We've been here since 4:30, so let's take just a short 5-minute break. I see some people smoking. Okay, we will call the City Commission meeting back to order. Move into Public Works. First item up is our Mausoleum expansion presentation, and this will be presented to us by GT Architecture, Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Grigori. I get that right? Gregory?
Gregoire.
Gregoire? Gregoire, okay.
Good evening, I'm Brian Gregoire of GT Architecture.
I'm Alec Johnson with GT Architecture. We're here today to just give you a brief update on the Mausoleum expansion or Mausoleum master plan project. So basically, we have been working with Public Works, the Public Works Department on and off here for a good while to produce construction documents that we'll have ready here very shortly and we'll be able to bid and go out to construction with. So we were asked to give a brief just overview of what we're doing here. So basically we were contacted because both the cemeteries and the mausoleum are at about 90% capacity right now. So there's really, the space available is lacking and there needs to be more space. So out of that need, we are constructing a second mausoleum building on this site with a proposed parking lot and some site improvements to go along with it. Let's see. So right now we can see the current site. You can keep going here. Let's see this one. And so this is what is being proposed, and this is what we are working on now. And like I said, we are about done with our construction documents. So the plan for the project is for this to bid in mid-February. First advertisement on the 2nd, and the bid date being the 23rd. That'll give contractors then afterwards, the awarded contractor, time to gather the materials, get everything in order. We'll have construction. We're planning to start that after Memorial Day weekend. Given that it's at the Mausoleum site, we want to wait until after that weekend, and construction will go through the summer and should finalize by October. So that is an update on what we are doing there. Any questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you, gentlemen. Commissioners, any questions on this project?
One for Loretta. I mean, do we typically put extra driveways on arterials like that? I mean, to access that parking lot? Being so close to an intersection?
Typically, there's a spacing requirement from an intersection that they would have to meet.
I mean, being that's an arterial, one of the main roads through town, is it typical that we add more driveways off of that? I mean,
I think, can you tell me what that spacing distance is on there?
To comment on that, I don't have the exact spacing offhand, but we have been working with Highlands Engineering, and Andrew Schrank specifically over there has worked through all of the requirements as far as intersections, and we are past any type of minimum that is required. Yeah. And it was also looked at potentially to have access from 14th Street, and that was deemed not feasible. And so where we're at there on 10th is acceptable after doing the research that's needed for it. The other thing about this parking lot is you can see on this image that there's the existing trail right there. And so there's been talk about tying a portion of sidewalk into the existing trails and to allow for citizens and residents to have a spot to park to access that trail, which is, I think, a really good thing to have. There really is no access point like that. You do see that in cities like Bismarck or Fargo, where you have a parking area to get on and off of these trails, and right now people are sort of just parking on a residential street and just hopping on. So this will provide an access point for that as well.
As we go through that process of site plan and seeing these, that coordination happens with that spacing.
In the new construction would have 4 columbariums, 72 each?
The new construction in the middle area there would have 4 freestanding columbariums. You can see them in this image here, or on that image here as well. Detail on them, let's see. They look like this. There are 4 of them on the site, freestanding with a foundation beneath them. Just so that we are aware as well, the interior has spaces.
Another 224 interior.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yes, and that was something that was discussed a lot with everybody throughout the city, with you know, basically the need for interior spaces and how the demand for the interior is so much more, and so we were allotting a space on the inside for some urns as well.
Well, that provides an additional, over 500 additional spots, so should provide some relief.
As we're looking at this project and the other, the Chapter 39 that we're looking at later today that we passed the first reading of last time, is there any concern that what we're building would be too big with allowing the
amount?
Help me, with Stevenson and Ladbury, what is that called? Since they can put, you know, build things now and there, if we would pass that motion today, is there any concern?
I think that these spaces will fill up very quickly, regardless of what Stevenson or Ladbury puts up in their facilities. These,
the acceleration of sales.
Right.
I mean, what Mr. Stevenson, what he shared a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I think down the road when we look at even the south side, that expanding that cemetery on the south side by St. Joe's Cemetery, we're gonna have to look at some sort of mausoleum, columbarium out there also, just because of the need.
And in speaking with the funeral homes, they're saying that the cremation rate is about at like 40%, whereas 10, 20 years ago it was down about 5%. And so that continues to rise. And so the count that we have here is heavier on that to allow for sort of that change that we're seeing, and that we're seeing in this town here specifically. So. And the other thing about this as well is that once the initial dollars are put forward, eventually that's a plot or whatever you'd want to call one of these individual spaces will be paid for, and then money will be returned at that time to the city. So the city recoups the dollars on at least the spaces. So, and we have worked with the Public Works Department on pricing for these things, because we're very modestly priced at the existing mausoleum. We're planning to adjust prices to be more in line with the standard, a bit raised up, and to also help recoup dollars for the construction project.
Any further questions on mausoleum expansion? And at this time, you're not looking for us to pass anything, this is just an update?
Yep, just an update, and then we will be, like I said, advertising for the first time on the 2nd,
Okay.
and then bidding on the 23rd.
All right, if there are no further questions, the gentleman? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next item up, we have a water main replacement project presentation and task order approval, and this will be presented by City Administrator Winningham and Mr. Schneider from Apex Engineering.
Good evening, President Decker and Commissioners. I believe we're pulling up a PowerPoint. Here we go. Scott Schneider from Apex Engineering. This is a presentation of the water main and lead service replacement plan, Phase 1. We work with Public Works Director Zeroff on this plan. I'll go through it quickly, and then following that is a task order that Mr. Winningham is going to present for Mr. Zeroff this evening. Presentation overview. I won't go through this in detail. I'll jump right into it. But really, your water distribution system is one of your assets, and it's important to have that technical background on this asset. What are the managerial components of that asset? When we have a water main break, it becomes a public situation where residents are without water. So this is an asset that does need Public Works attention. It has a financial component. What are the costs of replacing water mains as they break? What are the costs of loss of service for residents and businesses when there's issues out in the system? A typical water main really follows an asset decay curve. When it's at the end of its life, we have to invest money in that asset to bring it back up to a usable asset that doesn't have issues with it. The scope of this study was really tied to identifying a plan for water main and lead service replacement within a particular study area. We looked at water main breaks and locations of lead service lines within the study area. Public Works staff had some pipe coupons that we looked at. I'll show you the picture of those and the results of that. And then we looked at some financial plans on what are the costs of replacing water mains within this particular area, so that Mr. Zuroff can use that for planning CIP projects within this area. Overall, your water distribution system asset has about 150 miles of pipe citywide. About 12% of that is cast iron water main pipe, which is the pipe type that we typically see issues with. We see the breaks mostly on cast iron water mains, which are the older pipes within the city. We worked with Public Works on how many water main breaks have you actually had, and that includes, the breaks on the main, the service line to the house, hydrant issues, as well as valve issues out in the system. This is the data from the past 12 years. It averages about 6 a year. So, it sounds like a lot. There's a couple spikes in there, especially 2018. On the national average, though, it compares favorably to about 31 to 40 breaks per 150 miles. There's a lot of variables in that, age of your community, soil types, etc. But the challenge here is whenever you do have a break, it's that level of service loss for that homeowner business without water, and it becomes, a situation where Public Works has to respond quickly and get that water main back in service. So the study area that was chosen for phase one, it was called phase one because there's other areas in town that have cast iron water mains, but really the emphasis was west of Highway 22. Here's Highway 22 on this map. Ballard's running right here. So it was west of 22, north of the railroad tracks, over to State Avenue and up to I-94. And it was later expanded to the area south of the railroad tracks, down to the Hart River in working with engineering on the mill and overlay project, because we don't want to put a brand new mill and overlay project without making sure we fix those water mains underneath the street. The other area of emphasis that Mr. Zuroff really wanted to look at was this area here on this square. There's a lot of valving in that area that's not working correctly. If there's a break in that area, a large percentage of that area has to be shut down, and it's very challenging for Public Works staff to work on breaks within that area. This area in red here actually has about 49% of the cast iron water main within your system. There's a lot of it east of 22 where we're at here in this building. We know there's probably some future projects in this area downtown that are going to have to do some upgrades to all the infrastructure, not just water mains. So really the emphasis was let's look west of 22 first, and then maybe phase two is we can look east of 22 in more of the true downtown area. The red X's on the map are the breaks that were used, we received that data from Public Works. The other component that was looked at in this study area was lead service lines. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that at the end of the presentation. We do know that there are a lot of lead service lines in this area. Of course, older homes, the service line was lead into that home. There's been some replacements, but there's still a lot of old lead service lines out there. And there's a concentration in this area as well as kind of a scatter down in the area south of Broadway, down to the Hart River. So from the data, we really we worked with staff on developing some categories from the highest importance being category A down to E with these 5 categories. So category A's would be the red lines on the map, and a line represents a segment of water main, one block of water main. Where we have a break on that line, we've got 2 or more lead service lines. Category B would be no breaks, but we've got for sure one lead service line, all the way down to, 1 break, no lead service lines, no breaks, no lead service lines, but it's still cast iron. We're going to see a break someday, right? Because that asset is getting old. And then we actually have some PVC lines that still have lead service lines out there. The pipe material that Public Works supplied was from really four different project locations that they've worked on in the last 4 months. The 16-inch is on 2nd Street. It was in very good condition. That pipe is in very good condition yet. The 6-inch lines, though, we've seen about 7 to 24% deterioration of that wall thickness, which is, in the big picture, it's mild to moderate corrosion, but that's right where the pipe section was taken. 10 feet away, it could be 0, and that's really the challenge with the soil conditions that are deteriorating these water main pipes out in your system. So the challenge was to use that data. It really isn't a very good predictor of where we're going to have another water main break. Long term, that financial plan, we worked with Public Works on this, laid out 5 years. Of course, this could be spread over a lot longer depending on funding and capital improvement planning that has to take place. But to tackle those first 2 areas, the critical and the to high and medium, it's about 2.8 million, with the total for all of that area of phase 1 being 10.8 million. And that includes the lead service lines we know about right now and all the cast iron water main in that entire phase 1 area. Briefly on lead service lines, it's kind of a new thing in the replacement world, but in 1991 EPA published the lead and copper rules to minimize lead and copper in drinking water. There's been a lot of iterations of that through the years. The latest ruling, or the latest document, provides more updating to sampling and collection for cities, public education and outreach, with an emphasis on lead service lines themselves. The main component of that is that communities have to inventory their lead service lines by October of 2024. Dickinson's already way ahead of the game on that. The recent water meter upgrade project that Public Works has been doing, that contractor's been taking pictures and noting what the water service line is coming into each house. So that's been a very good process, so that is being tracked right now in that water meter upgrade project. So Public Works already has a jump start on that. As we get into the next phases of that, there's going to be some water service line replacement requirements that's based on your inventory, testing, results of water quality. And the challenge with it is, in the whole nation, is the cities can replace their service line, but what about the portion of the service line that the homeowner is responsible for? And in Dickinson, there's a little picture down here to the right. We have the water main and the curb stop. That's the city's responsibility, but past the curb stop into the home, that's the homeowner's responsibility. And to get credit for replacement, it has to be replaced all the way to the home. So the challenge in that, nationwide, not just in Dickinson, but is how do you get a homeowner or a business to be on board with replacement of that lead service line? And it really starts with coordination with the water main replacement project, as well as the funding of it. Recently, the drinking water SRF program is starting to include a 90% loan forgiveness on lead service line replacements. And we say loan forgiveness, but really it's a grant. If that homeowner would spend the money as part of that SRF program, they would get 90% reimbursement on that portion and only cost them 10%. Same with the city's side of the water service line. So really it's an incentive to start working on these lead service lines as part of the water main replacement projects, because in the past communities only replaced it up to the curb stop, right? Well, now there's an incentive to get that homeowner and business owner on board to try and do it all the way into the property. And Public Works is working on that. It's an iterative process to try and figure out how to work that into a project. Letters to homeowners, businesses maybe be coming in the future. How do you work that into the loans? So that's the piece of the puzzle that Mr. Zaroff and us with this future project will work through on these first round of water replacement projects.
Scott, this seems like a very, very large project once you really dig down into it. And my question is, is there the ability to find the contractors, enough contractors to even tackle this within a short period of time?
So the first deadline is only the inventory in 2024. We have almost 3 years to just do the inventory. And then after that, we'll start in on the actual requirements. And that's based on how many service lines you have versus all the service lines in the whole city, water quality testing that has to happen. So it could be a long process before they all have to be done. But you're right, the challenge is the contractors. I know in some communities they've worked with their local contractors and they'll do maybe 50 of them a year just to get started on it.
Yeah, well, this looks like a business opportunity to me for somebody who wants to get into this. There's a lot of these lines that need to be replaced.
So
Nationwide, like you
yeah,
said.
system-wide, yeah.
We have in the city right now?
I don't have that number handy right now.
Okay.
We should make sure that there's a class on this at the CTE.
At the sea, yeah. Excavators.
But
Mr.
I've taken
Winningham?
more questions.
You have anything additional, Mr. Snyder?
I don't. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, Mr. Winningham, you have a task order on this item.
Yeah, Mr. President and Commissioners, I'll just add, this is going to be a challenge for the city to articulate the needs of the citizens to help, not only for citizens to understand that the money has already been taken from them, mainly from the federal government. And so the intent of some of the recent legislation to include the American Rescue Plan Act, bigger dollars, not the one allocated to just the city, went to organizations like US EPA. And that is the primary proponent of the appropriations for the drinking water SRF loans. And so all of our citizens would potentially be eligible for those, to replace those lead lines from curb stop to house. It's going to be up to us to help with that process and then try to get that money back. We budgeted from Public Works $300,000 or so a year. I think that's what Mr. Zuroff has commented on, to start catching up some of these projects. I think they'll just be year over year that we incrementally try to correct some of these problems. But it's not just a City of Dickinson problem, but we want to get all the money that we can back from the federal government and the state of North Dakota. They've also allocated funding to the state of North Dakota. I think $1.2 billion in SRF type loans for clean water, for drinking water. And so our next consideration will be how we fight for those funding to get them back, because some are grants and some are loans, as Mr. Snyder talked about. But that'll be a process and a project that we start talking about to the commission and provide more details each time we get either money granted or we seek to get loans for the city to do our work, as we try to get loans or education to the citizens that they can also seek those loans. Because I think what will happen, the end state will look like is we're the ones that are doing the work, much like we do sidewalks, but we get the credit back so we don't have to ever do any kind of assessment back to the public. At least that's what it looks like in my mind as we talk through with staff. So in saying that, what's before you is the task order that starts the process for this.
This is task order 2022-1, water main replacement project. Are there any additional questions for Mr. Winningham or Mr. Schneider on this task order?
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Oderman.
Second?
Second by Commissioner Soboluk. Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Soboluk?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Our next item up is a waste handler wheel loader bid. This will be presented by Solid Waste Recycling Manager Prouse. Welcome.
Good evening, President, Vice President, Commissioners. Before you, on January 10th, we opened bids for a waste handler wheel loader to replace our 2016 Cat 950M that is currently working out in the landfill. Three bids were received. Butler Machinery bid a Caterpillar 962 for a final cost of $259,000. RDO Equipment bid a John Deere 724P for a total cost of $280,000. Titan Machinery bid a Case 1021G for a total cost or final cost of $310,900. Public Works staff is recommending the purchase of the 962 Caterpillar wheel loader from Butler Machinery for a total cost after trade of $259,000. This is a 2022 budgeted item for $305,000 on a 5-year lease.
Thank you, Mr. Prouse. Any questions for Mr. Prouse on this waste handler wheel loader purchase?
Mr. Prouse, any concerns with that overall height being 12.2?
No, we have 14-foot doors. So,
all right. I have to say, you public works guys, you always come in under the budget. I gotta say, nice job.
Thank you. We try our best.
Yeah.
Or they just, project high?
Yeah, they just, yeah.
The next one is pretty close, so.
Okay, any other questions or comments on the front loader for solid waste? Not, I look for a motion.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Frederick,
Second.
second by Commissioner Walla. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Our next item up is a roll-off truck bid, and this is for our approval. Mr. Prouse?
Again, January 10th, we did bid openings on a hook hoist roll-off truck. We received 2 bids. One from Wesley Truck Center, bidding a 2022 Freightliner 114 SD with a Galbraith body, and Northland Truck Sales bidding a 2023 Freightliner with an Ampler roll body. This will be replacing a 2007 International with an Ampler roll body. City staff is recommending the purchase of the Freightliner with the Galbraith body from Wesley Trucks for $188,853, which is the low bid. This was a 2022 budgeted item for $195,000 on a 5-year lease. And Commissioner Oderman, I cut this one kind of close.
Still under, though.
Still under.
Any other comments or questions on the roll-off truck for solid waste?
I'd move to approve the recommendation.
We have a motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
The motion is by Commissioner Sobeluk, second is by Commissioner Oderman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prouse. Our next item up is a driver training program services safe and smart entry-level driver training, ELDT, trainer certification program, and this will be presented by Operations Manager Clem.
Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners. You have in front of you a proposal for driver training. As of, some of you may or may not know, as of February 7th, 2022, the Federal Motor Carrier Act has instituted that all entry-level drivers training must have these regulations and certifications. Back in the day, anybody that had a CDL could teach somebody how to, but moving forward with all the stuff that has happened in the past, they have made it clear for the last couple of years that moving forward in 22, that you're going to have to attain a minimum of 40 hours of training, which is theory and behind the wheel. Currently, the city does not have a training program for entry-level CDL drivers. Typically what we've done in the past is they come in, teach them, train them, they go take their practical behind the wheel, then they get their test. Moving forward in ¡22, it has to be all documented through federal motor carriers. You have to be a certified trainer through a national accredited training facility, which J.J. Keller goes back over 60 years. Very, very, very diverse training program behind the wheel. The proposition that you have in your packet is to basically, they will bring 2 trainers out here, and the reason they got to bring 2 of them is because you can only have 1-to-2 ratio. So one of their certified trainers can train 2 of ours. So if this event is approved, we will have 4 trainers that will be able to train the trainers. They will provide us opportunity to train 10 people that come in that do not have CDLs that we can currently train. So that would allow us to hire individuals without a CDL and train them. In the cost, as you'll see on the second page, it's $1325.67 per month. What that's going to get us is we'll have 4 certified trainers. They'll come out. We'll have all the programming, the material, the manuals to train these individuals. And once that's all said and done, they will regulate all the entry into the Federal Motor Carriers Act, all that stuff. If we do not move in this direction, we'll have to find an accredited school or driver training program that currently is not really published here in Dickinson right now. And some of the upward cost in the surrounding cities and states is anywhere from $5,200 to $6,800 to train and employ anywhere from 40 to 120 hours. So the Public Works, we're looking for approval to move forward with this. It was not budgeted for 2022. But as moving forward, if we don't have this, it's going to somewhat hamstring us from hiring and training our own.
So, Mr. Clem,
moving forward.
this will get us four trainers.
This will get us 4
That'll
trainers.
be additional duty to the current duties they already have, those trainers?
Typically, yes, sir.
Okay. And then also, this allows them to conduct a program to train new individuals. How long does it take to train a new individual to get a CDL?
You have to go through a 40-hour class and behind-the-wheel training. So depending on how fast behind-the-wheel training, it could take up to 40 hours. It could take up to an additional 20, 30. It kind of just depends on the learning curve that he or she coming into the city has behind the wheel.
So this will be part of the onboarding when they come in, a new
Yes, sir.
hire?
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Unless we're lucky to obtain someone
Right.
that already currently has a CDL. Also, moving forward, as of February 7th, 22, if anybody that currently holds a CDL wants to upgrade their endorsement, they have to go through a 40-hour class. So if I have somebody with a Class B that's currently in the city, decides that he or she wants a Class A, they have to go through this training. Or they cannot move forward to get a Class A, or a tanker endorsement, passenger endorsement, anything. You have to have this moving forward.
So for about a $16,000 investment, we'll get 4 trainers that will be able to do that, and we won't have to expend outside of the time of those employees.
Correctly. Also, all the curriculum and the material needed to obtain by federal law to train our employees.
And here's another thing we can add to the Public Safety Training Center.
Yes.
The driver's course.
Yep.
Because we're going to have now 4 skilled trainers, an additional option not only to our police and fire, but to Public Works.
Yep.
That is correct.
So, Mr. President and Commissioner, just to be clear on this, this is the start point for our Train the Trainer program, but it's not fully developed in the internal policy. There needs to be a training program internally, and
Correct.
I know we do have some of it in place, some of the framework with Mr. Greg Beck and with Public Works, but it's not fully developed. But we are now racing a little bit of the clock because this is going to this is coming about in February. Should it have already been done? I think that we could have developed something a little faster last year. We didn't have all the information I think that we needed, but I think this at least gives us an option. And this is why this contract's before you.
Also, what you also will find in that, basically 16, that's like 15,216.
Yeah, it's 15.9 or something like that.
Their travel and their lodging for their 2 trainers is not covered in that cost. It was kind of hard for them to put a number on that, depending with flights and all that stuff. So it could be an additional couple $1,000 cost on top of that 15,216.
Well, thank you for that additional information.
I'd move to approve moving forward with this.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Oderman,
Second.
second by Commissioner Sobeluk. Any further discussion?
And legal's reviewed this?
Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Clem.
Thank you.
Our next item up is Chapter 39 Ordinance Amendment. This is consideration to approve the second reading and final passage of ordinance number 1742. Presenting this evening will be City County Planner Steve Josephson. Mr. Josephson?
Yes, thank you, President Decker, Commissioners. Good evening. This came to you two weeks ago. It is a proposed amendment by Stevenson Funeral Home. They were requesting amendments to the City of Dickinson Municipal Code, both the definitions, use types, and the Table 412 zoning district regulations. It would allow for the ability to have an outdoor columbarium as a conditional use permit. And just to your point earlier, Commissioner Sobolik, this is just adding it in as an opportunity to ask for this, for this entitlement. Nothing has changed since the first reading. Both the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff had recommended approval. And as I said, this is the second reading. The applicant's representative is here in the audience tonight in case you have any questions for him, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. Any questions for Mr. Josephson or the industry rep? We did have the public hearing already. There was no comment at the time of the public hearing. So I would look for a motion on this Chapter 39 ordinance amendment.
I'll move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Walla. Second by Commissioner Oderman. Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. We have no items from Building Code and Enforcement this evening. Handled that all this morning. So, Commissioners, this is your time. Are there any items you wish to bring up that were not on the agenda or need to come forward to the Commission's attention or to the public's attention? Hearing no Commission input, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned.
Hey.